Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Julie Gunnigle, welcome to the show. How are you this morning?
I'm spectacular. How are you doing?
I'm good. I was on Twitter the other day, and I'm, kind of swiping through the feed, and I saw a tweet that began with, "I was a student at the University of Notre Dame while Amy Barrett was a professor." And I think when I first saw it, it was, had maybe 20 or 30 likes. And then all of a sudden it kind of blew up. So I definitely want to get to your perspective on that nomination and what you think the implications might be for everyday Americans. But before we go there, just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Sure. So my name is Julie Gunnigle. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, which is inside, Maricopa County. I have a degree in chemistry from Northern Arizona University. I'm a self-identified nerd myself, raising three little nerds. One of whom is 12 and is nearly full-time at our community college. So the nerddom is strong there.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up deciding I didn't want to pursue a PhD in chemistry, and instead I really enjoyed being an advocate, and that's why I went to law school. So I was at the University of Notre Dame when Amy Coney Barrett was a professor. In fact, she was Professor of the Year. When I graduated, I had a lot of personal interaction with her that kind of shaped my worldview and where I think we need to go moving forward. But since that time, I ended up being a prosecutor in Indiana, and later a prosecutor of financial crime and public corruption in Chicago. And now I am an attorney with 14 years experience, running to run the third largest prosecutor's office in our entire country, which is the Maricopa County Attorney's Office.
I had no idea it was the third largest one in the country. Why is it so large?
Well, our county is so large. So our county is 4.4 million people. It's the fourth largest county in the country. And, we have had such a commitment to being so punitive here. Our prosecutor's office is as big as the county it serves.
Wow, that's incredible. What kinds of, what's sort of the makeup of the type of cases and crimes that your office would prosecute?
Sure. So if it's a felony and it happens in the county, it comes through the county attorney's office. So it's everything that you can imagine, from homicides to low-level thefts. And the office that I'm running for has a storied history. I mean, this is the county of Sheriff Joe. This is the county of, we had a prosecutor named Andrew Thomas who used this position in a very political way and ended up getting disbarred. It's very much a county that has a storied history. And it's a place where if we had someone who was data-driven and evidence-based, we could make some big reforms so quickly. So for example, like in my county, we are the 5th largest incarcerator in the country. We are the 8th largest incarcerator in the world. And we spend more in our prisons and jails than we spend in our world-class university system. That's wrong.
Yeah. So do you think in the past a lot of us, when we hear prosecutor and county attorney and that type of thing, we think, okay, well, they just, not just, but they'll prosecute crimes when it's brought to their attention, and it's kind of a dispassionate execution of justice, and there's not a lot of political bias or judgment in terms of like swaying one way or another. But it sounds like the way you're describing it, there has been some muddying of the waters from time to time, or what do you think about the previous kind of counties kind of activities around this area and what you would do differently?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I think that's a lot of people's perception that the cases come in and the prosecutor prosecutes them. But that is emphatically not what happens. The prosecutor has an absolute extraordinary amount of discretion. So when we talk about priorities, that's why this position is an elected one, because the voters deserve to know what your prosecutor's priorities are. Here in our county, it's been primarily low-level and nonviolent drug crime. And as a result, we have spent an extraordinary amount of money in our private prisons and in our prison system generally. And it's something that if a reform-minded prosecutor had her priorities straight, we'd be able to do big things like fully fund public education, but also end the school to prison pipeline and our foster care to prison pipeline. So that's one of the reasons that I'm running, because I just think that our priorities here in our county have been so misspent and so out of place with where we are nationwide. And it's one of those things that a prosecutor, because she has nearly unlimited discretion, can pick and choose what is a priority.
So some people listening to this may think, oh, well, now the streets will run sort of, you know, in a state of anarchy because the county attorney is not going to prosecute crime anymore. I'm sure that's not your vision. Like, where would you spend your time? What do you think would be different?
Sure. I mean, so what the evidence says and what the data says is that when we spend our time prosecuting violent crime, prosecuting crimes that target women, children, and our seniors, when we spend our time prosecuting financial crime and public corruption and human trafficking, that's what makes us more safe. Those are the kinds of crimes that really ought to be a priority. And, you know, when we look nationwide, you know, the kind of reforms that I've been proposing here in our county would take us down to, you know, being in the middle of the nation when it comes to policing, in the middle of the nation when it comes to incarceration. And these are not, you know, this like liberal bastions. This is like taking us down to where Utah is in terms of our priorities and spending. So, you know, it's interesting, though, because one of the studies that has been done recently shows that when you over prosecute, so for example, in Arizona, we over prosecute drug crimes. Our even low level methamphetamine possession, we have a 5, 10, 15 sentencing scheme. 5 years at the low end, 15 at the high end, your presumptive sentence is 10 years for simple possession that is nonviolent. And when you have a system like that is so unfairly punitive, you end up with more crime, because what you do is you destabilize families. You take someone who's working out of the community, place them in a situation where they're not working and where it's incredibly difficult to reintegrate. And you end up seeing more crime as a result of over incarceration. So what we're working toward is that education piece and letting people know that we can be more fair, we can be more just, we can save a ton of money. We just have to get our priorities straight.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense around the punitive stuff, because you know, a very kind of distant analogy, but something close to my heart is, as a father of 2 kids, I have found over the years that when I'm really excessively strict and kind of introducing negative consequences for every little thing they do, I actually found that they exercise worse judgment because they just feel like they're constantly, you know, being penalized for things. And then when I kind of take a step back and, you know, set kind of clear kind of principles, we can get to a much more kind of sustainable, kind of positive path. And I wonder, like, how do you think you strike that balance? Because obviously we still need to protect citizens, and, you know, the laws are there for a reason. On the other hand, if every time you see a police car, you're just freaking out like they're trying to get me for something, it just creates a very kind of negative environment for everybody.
Oh, you're so right. And I think that's the perfect analogy, right? I mean, there's been such a big erosion of trust for that reason. It's one of the reasons why we see so many communities moving toward community-based policing, where it's, you know, people are integrated into society. There's friendships that are built. You know that you can trust the system to get it right. But here in Arizona, it's been just so divisive, so broken, and so expensive for so long. It's going to take some big reforms to get us to that place.
In the last few months, obviously, the Black Lives Matter stuff has been in the news a ton. And I struggle with this one because I support a lot of the protesters in terms of them being really tired of excessive force when it happens, and demanding change. On the other hand, like, I am not a supporter of, you know, looting and arson. And how would you, if that happened, and I don't know what the state of the stuff in your county is, but if that were to come to your county, like, how would you think about working with the community and law enforcement and sort of, representatives to find that middle ground and get progress?
Yeah, I mean, that really is the question. So first of all, everything that we've done in this campaign has been done to emphasize that criminal justice is not a team sport. I am so tired of hearing an us versus them style rhetoric, and it's very prevalent here in our county. It's never that we want, it's never, and it should never be phrased as protesters versus police. That's not what any of this is about. I think the first step in resolving some of these big issues is making sure that we have a county attorney who's willing to acknowledge that we have a problem. And the problem here in our county is that we have some of the biggest racial disparities in the country. A Black person is 4 times more likely to be convicted of a marijuana offense than a white one. We've known this for years, and our county attorney hasn't been willing or able to do anything about it. So some of the reforms that I've put forward, start with collecting and making publicly available disaggregated data originating from this office, such that we can see how the criminal justice is playing out in this criminal justice system is playing out in this way, and then we can make those intelligent policy decisions moving forward. But what we've seen, here in our county are nonviolent protests for things like establishing racial justice here in our state and having police be accountable. And it is emphatically true that you can support law enforcement and still want to see an accountable system. And that's what we've been communicating with voters about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you said that African Americans are 4 times more likely to be convicted for a marijuana offense, is that 4 times more likely than other groups who were also already arrested? Like, how does that number come about?
Yeah, that's a per capita number. And we know that all races use marijuana at about the same rate, which makes the conviction rate even that much more striking.
Right.
But we see those disparities, all through our justice system. For example, the same study looked at Latinx folks and found that on average, they were paying between $200 and $300 more in criminal fines and penalties than our white population here in the state. So these differences run across the board and aren't reflective of anything other than the improper priorities of our justice system.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I saw some national statistics suggesting similar phenomena where if you look at groups, irrespective of the actual commissioning of the crimes, the conviction rate seems to be really higher for some groups more than others. I was also really struck in looking at data in the past around recidivism and how basically it seems like once you enter the prison system, it's really hard to get back on track, and the recidivism rate seemed consistent irrespective of ethnic group. And I was like, wow, so that just basically means once you get jumped into this thing, it's really, really hard to get out of it, even after you serve your time and you're quote unquote kind of, reintroduced into the community. Any thoughts on that, or is that sort of too far outside of the county attorney's kind of purview in terms of what happens after the conviction is done?
Well, that's exactly what a reform-minded county attorney should be concerning herself with. And one of the things that I've said is that all of our prosecutors need to understand the impact of what a jail or prison sentence looks like. So one of the things I participated in super early in my career was a reentry simulation. It's a giant room where you enter, and it's supposed to simulate the conditions upon release. Try to find a job, try to find transportation, try to find healthcare. Somebody perversely said that it's like a prison escape room, but that's exactly right. And I found out how quickly I ended up back in prison in this reentry simulation because of the lack of supports. Even trying your very best to do the right thing, the system is set up to fail. It's incredibly difficult to find employment. And in Arizona, that's even more true because we don't do expungements. meaning that if someone has a prior conviction, there's no way to get that real second chance. And forever, they will have to answer the questions on employment applications as to whether or not they have a previous felony. And it's one of the biggest reasons why we see folks end up right back into our prisons. And it's a system that we need to change. You know, I sat down with Dr. Mark Howard a few weeks ago from Georgetown, who talked, and his passion is about reentry and what it needs to look like in programs in prisons. And his program that brings, you know, Georgetown level classes into our prisons, instead of having a, you know, 60 or 65% recidivism rate, those folks recidivate at 3%. It is absolutely uncanny. When you give people the resources that they need to succeed, they use them, and it's far more humane. And guess what? It also saves us money.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. As you may know, this channel started in March of 2019, primarily in support of Andrew Yang's presidential campaign. And one of the things that he talked about was, of course, universal basic income. Mm-hmm. And when you ran the numbers about the cost to imprison someone and to put them through the legal system, it sometimes is actually cheaper to provide them at least with the economic floor, so they're less likely to sort of make choices that result in them going into prison than it is to prosecute and constantly incarcerate them. The numbers just are astounding. And, you know, yet I feel like we're still looking at this whole problem in very like a biblical eye for an eye kind of feel. And it just doesn't seem to be efficient or scaling for the good of the community.
Oh my goodness, you're absolutely right. And I'd go one step further. It's not that it's sometimes, you know, less expensive. It's almost always less expensive. Yeah. To provide supports and resources. But there's a big momentum behind the system that we have now. I mean, we didn't get here accidentally. Mm-hmm. Our for-profit prison system funds presidential campaigns. They fund congressional campaigns. They have a vested interest in getting people elected to the legislatures across the nation that will go ahead and raise mandatory minimum sentencing and will promote this sort of tough on crime rhetoric that doesn't end up making us safer, that makes us more incarcerated, and that, you know, just wastes our money. In many instances in the criminal justice system, we would be better off setting money on fire than we would be using it in the way that we're using it.
Yeah, it's I remember growing up in the 80s, my dad was a civil engineer, and he used to specialize in like tunnels and bridges and really cool things like that. And then in the 80s, their engineering firm, they were doing prisons constantly. And I was like, whoa, like I would say, hey dad, you know, what cool like tunnel or bridge or whatever are you working on? And he was like, no, got another prison deal. And so I think there was this kind of explosion in creation of all of these prisons, right? And now to your point, like we probably incarcerate per capita more than any other country out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, just my state is the 8th largest incarcerator in the world.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's nuts. And it like, so you either have to convince yourself that every other country out there is letting criminals just run roughshod over every community, or we're doing something wrong, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and we're doing something wrong again and again. We've been told that this system is broken, it's expensive, and it actually creates crime. Nevertheless, the momentum behind changing it is substantial.
Let's talk a little bit about cash bail. I saw that on your website, which for everybody out there, that is Gunnigle2020.com. One of the things you talk about is eliminating cash bail. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one, because I'm also a little bit ambivalent about this. On the one hand, I absolutely feel it's unfair that if you're poor, you're going to get like kind of held while someone like me, I could, you know, write a check and at least, you know, still kind of live at my house and hang out while I'm waiting for my trial. On the other hand, I'm worried that maybe no one will show up for their trial. So how do you think about that?
Well, as a data-driven person, you should rest assured that that's not what's going to happen. So first, the United States is nearly alone in the world in perpetuating this mythology that somehow being able to post a couple $100 bail will assure your return to court. Nearly no other nation in the world uses a cash bail system. And in fact, we have full states and jurisdictions like the Washington, D.C. that don't use cash bail either. And in fact, in Arizona, our district court, so our federal criminal justice system, doesn't use cash bail. And there's some really good reasons. First, it's ineffective. We know that if someone can't post their bail, so if they're being held for no other reason than their poverty, we know that at a few days, they're going to lose their job. At a few weeks, they're going to lose their housing. And at several months, they're going to be separated, most likely permanently, from their family. And what that perpetuates is a system where, again, we're setting people up to fail and to waste money in this system. It's also a waste of resources inside our system. It costs about $300 to book someone, and about $75 a day to hold them. So just the other day, I was interacting with a defense attorney who has a homeless client that was just barely getting back on their feet. They had obtained employment. They were ready to go. They got picked up on a low-level nonviolent, I believe it was a trespassing offense. But they're being held right now on $200 bail that they can't post. And so all of their efforts to rehabilitate themselves, to find employment, to eventually find stable housing, just got restarted because of nothing more than $200 that they didn't have. And that doesn't keep us any safer, and in fact wastes our money in a system that we know is failing.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear that there's fresh thinking on some things that a lot of us take for granted. And it's also easy for a lot of us to not know that the way we do things here is just so different than any other place. And I'm not saying that, oh, we need to look like the rest of the world, but when a vast majority of other developed countries are finding success with other approaches, like, we should at least keep an open mind. Like, we're an amazing country, the best in the world, but we can always get better. And it sounds like the cash bail system is another one of those things. Do you know anything about the history? Like, why do you think we have it?
Yeah, I mean, we have it dating back. It's in our Constitution, in fact, about bail. And, we very much subscribed to this mythology for a real long time that somehow resources make you more likely to appear. But what I find challenging, and why I like what you do and what so many other people are doing when it comes to the education piece, when we know better, we do better. We now have the numbers that show that this system isn't working, and it's easy once you see the problem, like that we need to take some sort of action. We've been seeing this problem for decades now. And other jurisdictions have started that reform. So, for example, New Jersey has made big strides. So has New York when it comes to cash bail and bond. I'm hoping that momentum continues. But a lot of us just don't have a daily interaction with the criminal justice system. So it's hard to understand just how broken it is.
How long do you usually have to wait for your trial if you can't make bail? Like, how long do you have to be locked, held?
Yeah. So let's be real. You're not getting a trial.
Oh. What do you mean by that?
In the 1970s, our trial rate was about 20%. About 20% of the cases that moved through our criminal justice system proceeded to that Perry Mason-like interaction in front of a jury where, there was truth and we got to hash it out in front of a judge.
Right.
That's not the system that we have right now. In my county, 1% of cases go to trial. And the reason why 1% of cases go to trial is that we've moved toward this system of mandatory minimum sentencing. And what that means is the system is not, judge at the top and, prosecutor and defense attorney going at it in a courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's that the prosecutor has so much power and has it very early in a charging phase. So, for example, in my jurisdiction, we can stack charges. How this plays out is, let's say you have someone who's, experiencing substance use disorder. Maybe they're doing low-level dealing in order to fund their habit. The police can watch them. They can watch a few buys. Even if this is their first offense, they will have all of those charges stacked up against them, and they'll be sentenced as a repeat criminal offender, even though they've never seen a judge before. And it can lead to extraordinary sentences, where the first time someone sees a judge, they're facing 25 or 30 years for low-level dealing related to their addiction. And when you're facing that kind of very real time, what ends up happening in our system, and this happens in a larger way to folks who are being held pre-trial on exorbitant cash bail, is that they're going to plead. They're going to take whatever offers in front of them because they know it's going to be better than what they get at trial. And guess what? During that same interaction, the prosecutor is telling them, if you go to trial and lose, it's not that I'm going to ask for this lesser sentence that I'm offering you now. I'm going to ask for something far, far worse. So people aren't proceeding to trial. And I think that's a danger to democracy. There's only a few different ways we get to challenge the government's power, right? We get to do it in 36 days now when we vote. And we get to do it as a member of a jury.
Yeah, that's, I didn't realize it was that small a percentage that goes to trial. I mean, in a way, the combination of, those maximum sentences or those min sentences that can stack puts a tremendous amount of power in the hands of law enforcement. But once they arrest you, even if you didn't do anything, if you just run the numbers, you're like, well, do I want to take a chance that I'm going to be in jail for 25 years? Maybe they convince somebody that I did it. Or I can take this deal and be, 1 year or something. Like maybe I do that, even though I'm innocent. Like it's just the rational choice is to take the deal.
Oh, 100%. I was just speaking to a family the other day whose son was, in the passenger seat of a car, and there was methamphetamine, a small amount in the back. Wasn't his. He didn't know about it. Nevertheless, gets picked up. And when you're facing a presumptive sentence of 10 years, it was the rational choice for him to plead and take, I think it was 2.5, even though he didn't know anything about it. The risks were just too high for him to challenge the evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. In that case, for practical purposes, the police officer is kind of playing role of judge and jury on the spot because, it's very unlikely that that this is going to go to trial. So the person is going to have to take whatever deal we give them. And I'm going to make that call right now. That's a huge deal. Do you feel like, how do you work with law enforcement, given that we have this system to, maybe this goes to like the training and kind of how we think about criminal justice reform on the ground? Is there a way, like, because I'm very appreciative of law enforcement because I know that if I needed help, like I would absolutely want to be able to dial 911 and have someone rush to the scene and protect my family and myself. On the other hand, what you're describing is a ton of power and, humans make mistakes and, we all have biases and things. How do you think about moving forward to kind of improve things?
Sure. I've been having these conversations with law enforcement since the beginning of my campaign, and they know that I am supportive of good policing every day of the week and twice on Sunday. We should expect excellence out of those who protect and serve. And what strikes me, because so many members of law enforcement have been volunteering on my campaign, is they get it. They see the injustices every single day, and they know that it's not right either, that they want someone in this office who's willing and open to reform, to making sure that people who are experiencing mental health issues end up in treatment rather than in incarceration. The same goes for, these low-level marijuana offenses and drug offenses that we've been talking about. They see it too. And I just loathe this idea that it's somehow that these reform and data-driven, efforts to change our system for the better somehow creates an us versus them, because it doesn't. It's about all of our community coming together and working together towards justice.
I agree. Yeah, I could also imagine if we can reform the system so less crime is committed and there's a more kind of positive path for the whole community, that results in a safer work environment for law enforcement too, right? Like I'm sure they don't love this kind of vicious circle we're in.
No, they don't. And in particular, the thing that I hear over and over again is that they are tired of arresting the same people over and over again. And they see that the system isn't working. It's not helping anybody, become, I hate this phrase, productive members of society, because what does that even mean? But it doesn't help anybody, to get the job that they want, to achieve the American dream, to have a family, to have a business here. They see how broken it is too.
Well, maybe there is a sort of confluence of incentives now where every part of the kind of ecosystem is interested in changing. We'll keep our fingers crossed. I know we're running short on time, so I do want to ask you, Julie, about your experience at Notre Dame and your views on this Supreme Court nominee with Amy Coney Barrett. How I think I've heard a lot of people say, like, hey, she seems really nice. She's obviously super talented. As you mentioned, like, professor of the year, and she's, has great credentials, amazing. It seems like amazing mother of 7. Like, that's, as a father of 2, I take my hat off to 7. That's incredible. But on the other hand, it sounds like if she were to sit on the high court, there would be potential kind of ramifications to people on the ground here in terms of their lives and their rights. And I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me first be effusive in my praise. I went to law school during a time where it was encouraged for professors to be both distant and scary. And if you've ever seen movies like The Paper Chase, a lot of that still existed when I was at Notre Dame. Amy Coney Barrett is definitively not that. She is kind. She is accessible. She was a stellar professor. But, and this is, I think, the bigger lesson of the last 2, if not 4 years, is that you can be kind, you can be smart, but if you're going to be embracing an ideology that regards some of our citizens as, worthy of lesser rights and fewer freedoms, that's disqualifying. And as I've been reviewing her record, first of all, I didn't know what an extremist she was when she was a professor. Very, very good about taking ideology out of the classroom. But when we're reviewing her record as a judge, there are some troubling trends. I am very worried about the future of Roe, and as a parent of young children, what that would mean to have them growing up in a post-Roe Arizona. I'm concerned on her record on LGBTQ rights and things that she said in behind closed doors when it comes to trans folks in particular. I am extremely concerned about the dignity of work, and I'm concerned about her record on guns, and the confluence of all of those things together, combined with the fact that we have an election in 37 days. I believe that people and the voters need to have a say on this in free and fair elections.
You mentioned some of your concerns are around her views on work or the dignity of work. Could you talk a little bit more about that? I wasn't familiar that she had taken any positions on that.
Yeah, so there's a decision that she made that essentially established a separate but equal, based on race-based workforce in a decision that came out of, I believe it was an EEOC work case. It's a troubling precedent, and it's not the only one. We've also seen cases when it comes to organized labor come up before our Supreme Court. And it seems to me that, another vote for a Janus type decision that would gut unions is emphatically not what we want here in, 2020 America. The other thing that is, and it's top of mind right now, is what Roe means. Yeah. Because that has been the lightning rod, that has been the litmus test. And in my county and jurisdiction, Roe falling means that women will be prosecuted for abortions and will be prosecuted for contraceptives. Those laws still exist on the books here in Arizona.
I've seen enough confirmation hearings or excerpts from them where it does seem to me like whether they're a Republican nominee or Democratic nominee, generally a lot of people will say, hey, this has been, litigated or addressed for decades and decades now. This is settled law. We're not going to go back and change everything. And if the government or the people want to change this, then they'll do that through legislation. And when I hear that, I think, okay, so even if you are super conservative, like, you're going to respect precedent and you're going to respect the fact that this has already been evaluated many times. Do you feel like Judge Barrett would go beyond that, or?
Well, so first, and I think this is like the key about this sort of punditry involving her nomination, is that none of that is binding. It doesn't matter what you say in confirmation hearings. You can't later take that to a judge and say, but you said this at this point in time. Listen, we're 37 days away from an election. There is only one reason why this nomination is happening right now, and it's happening because they have the power to push it through. This has been the dream for a very long time. And if it was true that this person is, truly that moderating voice who's going to respect precedent, that's a nomination that can wait until after an election. That's not what this is. This is an abuse of power, and this is the final vote that they need in order to undo what has been nearly 50 years of precedent in the making. So when I hear things, and I know in particular, another Notre Dame law professor wrote an op-ed, just basically telling folks, calm down. She's a good person. She's going to get it right. I have very little faith in that, because those sorts of hot takes and punditry, they last a news cycle. But we, the American public, are going to be stuck with a Supreme Court appointment for a lifetime, which is why we need to be more careful and not have a rushed through nomination just in the days leading up to an election.
It's a great point about how those statements made at confirmation hearings are not really binding, and a little bit for kind of news consumption. Because I remember also watching Bill Barr's confirmation hearing, and he really came across as a super even-handed, dispassionate, like, hey, I don't need this job. I'm just trying to do the right thing for the country. I'm going to execute sort of, fair and impartial justice, and all the stuff. And then now you look at him and you're like, who is this man? And he doesn't even have a lifetime appointment. So I guess it is possible that that whatever Amy says or Judge Barrett says in the confirmation hearings, it may not really reflect how she presides on the Supreme Court. What are your thoughts on last topic, Julia? I know we're running just a few minutes to go, but what are your thoughts on ballot security and voting kind of in Maricopa County? Are you feeling like the county is ready? I've heard it talked about, like, there's going to be massive amounts of fraud and people finding dumpsters full of ballots and rivers and things like that. How are you feeling about things?
Yeah, no, not in my county. So we have ballots arriving in the mail in 9 days. Maricopa County has led the country when it comes to mail-in ballots. We've had it here for decades. It's a system that works, that's transparent. We have a world-class county recorder in Adrian Fontes and Secretary of State in Katie Hobbs, who have worked tirelessly to make it easy and secure for us to vote. And what is so cool is that in our county, I'm going to get a text message here when my ballot gets mailed to me. And when I return that ballot, I'm going to get a text message when it arrives. And then when it's separated from the signature verification process, I'm going to get a notification when it is counted. Wow. So here in Arizona, I know that we are going to have free and fair elections where every ballot will be counted, and we're not going to see any of this nonsense.
Wow, that's amazing. Why? Is there a reason why you guys are so on top of things? That sounds like ordering from Amazon. It's amazing. You get the tracking over time.
Yeah, I mean, well, so heck yeah. So for all of your viewers, like, first follow me. I'm at Julie Gunnigle on Twitter, but also follow Adrian Fontes. We got a new county recorder in 2016, and he has done an amazing job of providing the technology that we need in order to have these elections, in providing that text message follow-up. Oh, here's what's so cool we can do here too. Unlike other areas where you have to go to your precinct and all those ballots are, ready for you to go in those giant stacks, here in Maricopa County, I can go vote at any voting center I want to. So if I work downtown but live up in the suburbs, I get my choice of any of those voting centers in between, where when I show them my ID and get checked in, the individual ballot, that is tailored to me, to my jurisdiction, to my legislative district, to my congressional district, is printed out on the spot. And then when it gets fed through the machine, again, I get a text message so that I know my vote counts. Wow. It's an incredible system, and it's nearly 100% because of the efforts of Adrian Fontes. Wow.
Go, Adrian. Well done, Mr. Fontes. So let me ask you, is it Mr. Fontes or?
It is. It's Mr. Fontes.
Yeah. Right on, Adrian. So when the Secretary of State or whoever in Arizona certifies the results, you don't think there's going to be a lot of ambiguity to the outcome?
No, not here in Arizona. We do an amazing job of making sure that every vote counts and that every vote is counted. That means that it might take a little while. One of the issues is when you have mail-in ballots, a lot of folks like to drop off their mail-in ballot on election day. Right. And then of course that goes through the verification process. So that can take a while. But once election results are certified and final, I have full faith that those are going to be accurate. We do an amazing job here in Arizona.
That's great. And so that's a great warning for people. Just because you don't see results on the night of November 3rd doesn't mean that there's a huge sort of scam going on, that this is natural because there's more people mailing it in due to the coronavirus stuff, that it will take some time. And don't let people tell you, oh, because you don't have the results, at 11 p.m., somehow this election is being stolen. It's actually being executed in a proper kind of planned way, and it just takes time to count paper ballots.
100%. And wouldn't you rather have accuracy than have something done immediately?
Yes. Amen, Julie. Well, I have really thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
No, I just need folks, whether they're here in Arizona or across the nation, to get out there and vote like your life depends on it, because it does. And I just wish everybody a great election day.
Right on. Well, with that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Fantastic.
Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. Let's get this bread. Freedom dividend. Are all y'all paying attention? Automation gonna sweep the nation unless we get him in. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. First we get this money, then on 420 he gonna give some high fives to some high guys. Decriminalize marijuana so we can smoke if we wanna. Down with the opioid trend, up with the mental health thing. Yeah, math, yo, it's just math. Yo, it's simple math. Yo, can you do math? Yo. Eliminate super PACs, college stars making stacks, student loan forgiveness plan, cops wearing cameras and climate change is real again. Science rules. Teachers bringing home some bread. Medicare for every citizen. That's nice. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah.